The back seat of our SUV was supposed to be empty, filled only with wrapped Christmas gifts and a cooler of sandwiches. But as I glanced into the rearview mirror while driving through the pitch-black silver birch forest at 2 a.m., I saw a pale, thin hand slowly reaching out from beneath a heavy wool blanket. It wasn't my wife, Lainey. She was fast asleep in the passenger seat. It wasn't our dog. The hand was small and grayish, moving with terrifying, deliberate precision, reaching for the handle of the rear passenger door. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on black ice, my chest locking up as the hand vanished instantly, slipping back into the shadows of the luggage. "Lainey, wake up!" I shouted. She jerked awake. What happened?" I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it into the back. The gifts were shifted. The blanket was ruffled. But the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was what I heard. A soft, wet thump came from the trunk area, followed by a small metallic click. Someone had been hiding in our car for hours, and they had just unlocked the door from the inside. My name is Grant. Every year, Lainey and I make a 12-hour drive to her parents' cabin for the holidays. We usually love it. This year, we left late on December 23rd to avoid traffic. It was bitterly cold. Before leaving the city, I spent nearly an hour loading the SUV. At one point, I left the trunk open while I ran back inside for a bag of oranges and a thermos of hot cocoa. Our driveway sits behind tall hedges, and it was dark. "Did you lock the car?" I asked as we pulled away. "I thought you did," Lainey muttered, already drifting off. I shrugged it off. Safe neighborhood. Nothing ever happens. For the first 2 hours, the drive was peaceful. Soft jazz on the radio. Snow brushing past the headlights. Just the hum of tires and wind. 3 hours in, we reached the outskirts of silver birch forest. No streetlights. Just tall white trees glowing under the moon like frozen sentinels. That's when the car tilted slightly to the left. It felt like weight shifting in the back. I assumed a box slid, but then I heard it. Crinkle. 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 Wrapping paper. Being torn slowly. Carefully. I checked the mirror. Nothing but darkness. Then the interior light flickered on for half a second, and shattered with a tiny ping. In that flash, I saw the gifts stacked into a wall, completely blocking the rear of the SUV. Something had built a barricade. The car went dark again. I told myself it was the cold. Brittle plastic. Gravity. Anything. I didn't want to wake Lainey over paranoia. I turned the heater up. Despite the heat blasting, icy air brushed the back of my neck, like a window was cracked open. The dash showed everything sealed. The road twisted deeper into the woods. My hands shook on the wheel. I decided I'd pull over at the next stop, Oak Haven, 30 miles ahead. As the silence thickened, I reached into the center console for my water bottle. Something brushed my knuckles. Cold. Damp. Furry. I yanked my hand back, heart slamming. In the console sat a small wooden nutcracker. I had packed it taped inside a box at the bottom of the trunk. Then a whisper slid across my ear. Not words. Just breath. S-E-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch-Ch. It was so close I felt the air vibrate against my skin. Someone was inches behind me. I froze. 70 miles per hour on a narrow forest road. Slamming the brakes could kill us. Lainey slept on, unaware. Then another sound started. Tap. 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 Metal against the floorboards. Slow. Methodical. Like someone searching. I realized the earlier thump hadn't been a box falling. It had been a person shifting position. I focused on the road, locking my eyes forward. Blue Ridge rest stop, 10 minutes away. People. Light. Safety. I just had to last 10 more minutes. The glowing blue sign finally appeared through the trees. Hope surged. but whatever was behind us knew we were stopping. As I slowed for the exit, the pile of gifts exploded forward. A suitcase slammed into my seat, pinning me against the steering wheel. Lainey woke up screaming as a dark figure lunged from the back. It wasn't a monster. It was a man. Tattered yellow parka. Oil stains. Grease smeared across his face. Eyes wide with desperation. He didn't attack us. He grabbed the thermos of hot cocoa from the cup holder, shoved Lainey's door open, and croaked, "I'm sorry." Then he leapt. The car was still moving when he hit the snowbank, tumbling into the darkness of the rest stop. I slammed the brakes. The SUV spun and stopped beneath a harsh halogen light. We sat there in silence, the engine idling, the door swinging open in the wind. Police arrived 20 minutes later. In the back of the SUV, they found a nest, blankets, and crushed gift boxes. They found a rusted metal file, used to tap against the floor. The man's name was Silas Fane. He'd escaped a transport van 3 days earlier. Not violent. Homeless. Broken. Trying to reach the mountains where he grew up. He'd seen my trunk open and climbed in, hoping to be carried somewhere warm. He stayed hidden for 3 hours, silent, freezing, terrified, waiting for a chance to run. They found him a mile away, under a tree, drinking the cocoa. We finished the trip. But I never load a car the same way again. Now, every blanket gets lifted. Every box moved. Because sometimes, the scariest thing in the dark isn't what's following you. It's what's already inside. I was staring through the windshield into a solid wall of fog on Crestline Pass when the radio, completely off, suddenly exploded at full volume. It wasn't music. It was a woman screaming a single name through violent static. "Peter. Peter. Look at the bumper." I clamped my hands over my ears as the car swerved toward the edge of the mountain road. My brother, Tobias, lunged across the seat and ripped the radio knob clean off, but the screaming continued for 3 more seconds before the entire dashboard went black. Silence swallowed us. The air was thin and freezing, our breath fogging the cabin. "What was that?" Tobias whispered. "I don't know," I said. "But look." Tied to the rusted guardrail ahead was a long, bright red ribbon, snapping wildly in the wind. 20 feet farther, another. Then another. A trail of red silk vanished straight into the thickest part of the fog where the road disappeared. Before either of us could speak, something slammed into the underside of the car. A heavy, metallic thud, like hands grabbing the rear axle. "My name is Julian. This happened 2 years ago while Tobias and I were driving cross-country to visit our aunt for New Year's Eve. To save time, we took a shortcut through the Ironwood Mountains, a stretch of road known as Crestline Pass. The sun had set early. Fog poured down from the peaks and swallowed the road completely. "Maybe we should turn back," I said, squinting at the headlights reflecting off the mist. "The map says this is the only way before the snow hits," Tobias replied. "We're already halfway." The heater barely worked. The car smelled like old fabric and peppermint gum. For a while, it was just a boring drive, talking about childhood memories and bad movies while gray rock faces and dark pines drifted past outside. As we climbed higher, the road narrowed to a ribbon of cracked asphalt. The drop to the right disappeared into nothingness. I rounded a sharp bend and slammed on the brakes. In the middle of the road sat a large, beautifully wrapped present. Gold foil. Perfect bow. Completely out of place. "Did someone drop that?" Tobias asked. I cracked the window. The mountain was dead silent. Then the box began to shake. At first, gently. Then violently. Something inside was pounding, fast, desperate. A sharp blade suddenly punched through the top of the wrapping paper, slicing a jagged line through the ribbon from the inside. I didn't think. I floored the gas, swerving around the box and disappearing back into the fog. Neither of us spoke for miles. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting the gold box to be following us. Instead, I noticed a faint metallic sound coming from the dashboard. Tick, 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 tick. Not rhythmic. Wrong. I told myself it was the engine cooling in the cold air. We passed an abandoned wooden shack. Nailed to its door was a single red ribbon, twisting slowly in the wind. The road began to slope downward, and relief crept in. Then the windows fogged from the inside. I wiped the windshield and froze. On the outside of the glass, a finger was drawing in the frost. I watched the line form in real time as it sketched a crude smiley face. We were moving at 40 miles an hour. There was no one on the hood. Tobias let out a broken sound. A second later, something slammed onto the roof with a deafening bang. The metal buckled downward inches from his head. "Drive," he screamed. I mashed the accelerator. The engine screamed in protest. Whatever was on the roof was heavy. I heard long nails scrape against the paint, dragging, searching for grip. Then, nothing. The weight vanished without a sound. The fog thinned as we descended. City lights glimmered faintly in the distance. I checked the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but the rear window wasn't. Dozens of red ribbons were tied to the rear wiper blade, knotted tightly, layered on top of each other. They hadn't been there before. The ticking stopped. A wet gurgling sound drifted from the vents. We burst into a gas station at the base of the mountain and skidded to a stop in front of the doors. We spilled out of the car, shaking. An old attendant rushed over. "You boys all right?" Tobias pointed at the car. Something was on the roof. The man walked past the roof without looking, straight to the back bumper. His face drained of color. "Oh no," he whispered. Wedged between the bumper and trunk was a man. Small, blue with cold, wearing a thin, tattered jumpsuit. His hands were enormous, thick with black calluses. In one hand, a rusted hook. In the other, a bundle of red silk ribbons. He smiled at us. Before anyone could react, he dropped to the ground and sprinted into the woods with terrifying speed, vanishing into the darkness. Police arrived later. They said he'd been clinging to the car for over 30 miles, marking claimed vehicles with ribbons along the pass. A local hermit. Nonviolent. Just wrong. The gold box was found empty the next day. I don't take shortcuts anymore. And every time I get into my car, I walk all the way around it, checking the bumpers, the wheel wells, looking for red ribbons. I was leaning over the steering wheel at 3:15 a.m., squinting through a blinding blizzard on Copper Creek Bridge, when something massive slammed into the driver's side window. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't a branch. It was an ice hockey skate. The frozen blade punched straight into the safety glass, exploding it into a spider web of cracks inches from my face. Attached to the skate was a leg wearing thick brown corduroy pants. I screamed and swerved toward the icy railing. My younger sister, Cora, jolted awake in the middle row, shrieking as she grabbed the seat in front of her. Through the cracked window, I saw a face pressed against the glass. It was wrapped in a stiff, yellowed bandage, with only one dark, frantic eye visible. The person wasn't standing on the road. They were hanging from the roof rack of our moving van, swinging violently as we crossed the bridge. "Don't stop!" Cora screamed. "Lucas, do not stop!" I looked to the passenger side. Another frozen hand, blue with cold, was clawing at the door handle, trying to wrench it open. We weren't alone on the bridge. "My name is Lucas. Last winter, Cora and I were driving home from a late-night holiday party at my college. We had 6 hours of road ahead of us through the northern part of the state, a region filled with ravines, old highways, and ancient bridges. The snow started about an hour into the drive. Not flurries. A whiteout. Snow came down so thick I could barely see the hood of the van. We were driving an old, heavy minivan that handled well in slush, but the heater was making a strange, high-pitched whine. "It smells like wet wool," Cora muttered, pulling her hood tighter. "It's probably the floor mats," I said, trying to stay calm. We chewed beef jerky and sipped grape soda to stay awake. The radio played old folk songs, crackling softly. Outside, the world was just a tunnel of swirling white. I felt safe inside the heavy metal shell of the van. I shouldn't have. The road leading up to Copper Creek Bridge narrowed sharply. Trees bowed under the weight of ice, their branches hanging low like arms. Then my headlights caught something standing in the center of the lane. I slowed to a crawl. It was a wooden coat rack. Perfectly upright. Right in the middle of the blizzard. Hanging from it was a bright orange hunting vest. "Why is that there?" Cora whispered. As we crept past, the vest suddenly puffed outward, as if someone had just stepped into it. The empty sleeves lifted and pointed directly at our back tires. A second later, something slammed into the rear of the van. Crunch. Then a long, grinding sound followed us, metal dragging against asphalt, slow and heavy, like a chain being pulled. I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. "Maybe it's debris," I said, forcing the words out. "Lucas," Cora said softly. "Look at the ceiling." The fabric roof liner was bulging downward. Not sagging. Pressing. Like a palm being pushed from the outside. The bulge slid slowly forward, inch by inch, directly above my head. I punched the ceiling. The bulge vanished instantly. Then came a soft padding sound, like footsteps in thick socks, moving across the roof. We were halfway across the bridge. Wind screamed through the steel supports, turning the whole structure into a giant harmonica. The dragging sound suddenly stopped. Silence settled in. I reached for the defroster. My fingers hit something hard. Sitting on the dashboard, where there had been nothing seconds earlier, was a small plastic toy soldier. It had been painted entirely black. I picked it up. It burned. So hot it left a red welt on my thumb. Before I could react, thick gray smoke poured from the heater vents. It didn't smell like engine smoke. It smelled like burning pine needles. Through the smoke, I heard it. A tiny giggle. High-pitched. Coming from beneath the rear seats. Someone was inside the van. I hurled the toy soldier out the window and rolled the windows down. Freezing air blasted inside, clearing the smoke. "Cora, check the back," I yelled. She spun around, phone flashlight shaking. "There's no one here. Just our bags." I glanced into the rearview mirror. The seats were empty. But the rear window wasn't. Dozens of small, muddy handprints were smeared across the glass from the inside. Then the interior lights began flashing. On. Off. On. Off. In each flash, I saw a reflection in the very back row. A person sitting upright. Wearing a heavy raincoat. A cracked porcelain mask. But whenever the lights stayed on, the seat was empty. The van slowed suddenly, like an invisible foot was pressing the brake. That's when the man with the hockey skate dropped down from the roof and kicked the window again. The blade jammed deeper into the glass. He used it like a lever, trying to peel the window out of the frame. Behind him, 3 more figures stepped out from the snow at the bridge pylons. Same brown corduroy pants. Long metal hooks in their hands. They weren't trying to rob us. They were trying to stop the van. I slammed the gear into low and floored it. The engine screamed. The van lurched forward, ripping the skate straight out of the man's boot. He fell backward into the snow with a dull thud. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I drove straight to a police station in the next county. Officers inspected the van. The hockey skate blade was still embedded in the door frame. The dragging sound? A heavy iron anchor tied to our rear bumper with rope. They'd hooked us like a fish. The police told us about people who lived in the maintenance tunnels under Copper Creek Bridge. They waited for blizzards, for slow cars, for holiday travelers carrying food and supplies. The toy soldier and the handprints. One of them had climbed into our trunk at a red light before the bridge, hiding under the floorboards as a spotter. The others escaped into the tunnels. Our suitcases were gone. We made it home. But I never drive over bridges in the snow anymore. And I lock my doors the moment I turn the key. I was kneeling in the mud of a dark roadside turnout in Pine Sap Valley at 1:10 a.m., trying to change a flat tire, when I heard it. Thwack. 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 The sound of an axe biting into wood, steady and deliberate, coming from the trees no more than 10 feet away. I froze with the lug wrench halfway off the bolt. I raised my flashlight, my hands shaking, and the beam caught through the pines. That's when I saw him. A tall, thin man stood just beyond the tree line. He wore a bright red flannel shirt and a heavy leather apron streaked with dark stains. He wasn't chopping firewood. He was standing over our luggage. Our Christmas suitcases, taken from the roof rack without either of us hearing a thing, were piled on the ground. The man brought the axe down again and again, methodically hacking a suitcase into jagged chunks. My girlfriend, Nadia, was locked inside the car. Her face was pressed against the window, pale and screaming silently. The man stopped chopping. Without turning around, he reached into the destroyed suitcase and pulled out a small plush teddy bear, a gift from my nephew. He set it carefully on a tree stump and raised the axe high over his head. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking. The man froze. Then, without moving his shoulders, he slowly twisted his head all the way around to look at me. His neck made a sound like dry branches snapping. His eyes were coated in a thick, milky white film. "My name is Elias. This happened 3 years ago, when Nadia and I decided to take a scenic route through Pine Sap Valley on our way to a mountain resort for the holidays. We were driving a sturdy 4x4, loaded with camping gear and gifts. The sun had disappeared behind the peaks hours earlier, leaving the valley drowned in shadow and the sharp scent of pine needles. The road was narrow and poorly maintained. "Do you think we missed the turn for the lodge?" Nadia asked, unfolding a paper map. "The GPS said to keep straight," I said. "But the signal died miles ago." We passed the time playing stupid road trip games and snacking on dried apricots. The heater hummed warmly. The dashboard lights glowed a comforting green. Even as the trees pressed closer to the road, we felt insulated inside the car. That feeling didn't last. The deeper we went, the muddier the ground became. Then, without warning, a massive pine tree crashed across the road about 50 yards ahead. I slammed on the brakes, the car sliding sideways before stopping. The tree hadn't fallen naturally. At its base were clean, sharp axe marks. "Elias," Nadia whispered. "Look behind us." Another tree lay across the road behind us, blocking the way completely. We were boxed in. Then something hit the roof of the car. Thump. A thick, dark liquid began oozing down the windshield. It wasn't oil. It wasn't mud. It was tree sap. Sticky, amber-colored, and so pungent it burned my eyes. I turned on the wipers, but they only smeared the sap into an opaque film. "Stay inside," I told Nadia. "I'll clear it." The cold air bit into my face as I stepped out. The valley was unnaturally silent. As I scraped at the sap, I noticed the flat tire. A long, sharpened wooden spike had been driven straight into the sidewall. That's when I heard it. Tink. 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 Someone was tapping on the metal fuel tank beneath the car. Slow. Mocking. I knelt to look underneath, but the sound slid to the other side of the vehicle, always staying just out of sight. I realized then we weren't just stranded. We were being played with. I rushed back to the driver's door, but it wouldn't open. Inside, Nadia was pointing frantically at the ignition. The keys were gone. The engine was still running, but the keys had been pulled out while I was outside. I saw a small, dirty hand slip back through the cracked passenger window. In the center console, someone had left a rusted iron wedge used for splitting wood. Resting on top of it was a single bloody fingernail. The power locks began clicking rapidly, locking, unlocking, locking, like someone was pressing a button over and over again from the trees. I told Nadia to hold the lock down manually. Then I grabbed my flashlight and circled the car. "I see them," she whispered. "In the trees." I shone the light into the pines. 3, maybe 4 figures stood motionless between the trunks. Their faces were smeared with black soot and red clay. They wore leather aprons and held tools, saws, mallets, hooks. One of them raised a hand. Wrapped around his fingers was a small blue ribbon. Nadia's hair ribbon. He slowly tied it around the blade of a handsaw. That's when I ended up kneeling in the turnout, facing the man with the axe and our shredded luggage. After he twisted his head around to face me, he finally moved. He didn't run at me. He swung the axe into the side of the car, right into the fuel line. Gasoline sprayed onto the sap-soaked ground. From his apron, he pulled out a silver matchbox. He wasn't trying to kill us with the axe. He was going to burn us alive. Inside the car, Nadia screamed that she'd found the spare key hidden in the glove box. The engine roared back to life. I dove into the driver's seat as the man struck a match. I floored the gas. The car smashed through smaller branches, tires screaming in the mud. Behind us, a fireball erupted as gasoline ignited, the heat washing over the rear of the vehicle. We fishtailed blindly until we burst out onto the main highway. We didn't stop until we reached a ranger station miles away. The next morning, authorities returned to Pine Sap Valley. The people were gone. They found the fallen trees, the burned luggage, and a hidden cellar dug into the hillside, filled with hundreds of stolen items, wallets, shoes, broken toys. They called them wild harvesters, a family that lived deep in the valley and despised outsiders. They used sap to blind drivers, trees to trap them, and fear to keep people from fighting back. The man with the twisted neck wasn't supernatural. He had a medical condition that let him rotate his torso in a way that looked impossible in the dark. That explanation didn't make it easier to sleep. We never got our gifts back. The car was totaled. And every holiday since, I avoid scenic routes. Because whenever I hear someone chopping wood, I don't think of fireplaces anymore. I think of a man in a leather apron, waiting in the trees. I was gripping the steering wheel of my pickup at 2:45 a.m. on Mist Valley Bridge when I saw her standing in the middle of the road, holding a single, flickering candle. She wasn't waving for help. She wasn't moving at all. As I slammed on the brakes, the candlelight lifted just enough to reveal her face, and my stomach dropped. Her eyes were sewn shut with thick black fishing line, the knots puckering her skin. She raised one trembling finger and pointed directly at my front tire. The truck skidded to a stop, vibrating beneath us. My brother, Caleb, jolted awake in the passenger seat. "Simon, who was that?" Before I could answer, the woman leaned forward and blew out the candle. The instant the flame died, the bridge vanished. The darkness wasn't normal night dark. It was absolute. I couldn't see the dashboard. I couldn't see my hands. Then I heard it. Slap. 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 Bare feet running fast across wet metal, straight toward my door. I reached for the lock, but a hand shoved through the cracked window and clamped around my throat. The skin was cold and damp, reeking of old salt and raw onions. Fingers dug into my neck as something wheezed inches from my face. I screamed as the truck rocked. "My name is Simon. My brother and I were driving through the coastal mountains to reach our grandmother's house for New Year's. We were in my old pickup, loaded with a heavy wooden crate of homegrown vegetables and several cases of cider from a local orchard. The weather had turned strange after midnight. Warm coastal air rolled into the cold mountains, creating a thick fog that swallowed everything beyond the headlights. We should have stayed at that motel, Caleb muttered earlier, rubbing his eyes. "We're almost there," I told him. "Once we cross the bridge, it flattens out." We had a history podcast playing low, the heater humming steadily. The fog erased the world outside, leaving only reflectors flashing past like distant eyes. The road narrowed as we approached the bridge. Ancient trees leaned over the pavement, their branches heavy with winter fruit. That's when something slammed onto the roof of the truck. Thud. Then another. Thud. Thud. A green winter pear bounced off the hood, splitting open and spraying juice across the windshield. Then more followed, dozens of them raining down with terrifying accuracy. Through the smeared glass, I saw someone sitting high in the branches above the road. They wore a tattered denim jacket and a burlap hood. In their hands was a long wooden pole, which they used to knock more fruit directly onto our path. I pushed through the mess and onto the bridge. In the mirror, I saw the road behind us coated in crushed pears, slick as ice. The tires hummed against the steel grate. "That guy," Caleb whispered. "Did you see his face?" Before I could answer, a strange ticking started under the hood. Tick. 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 Not mechanical. Too deliberate. The ticking sped up when I accelerated and slowed when I eased off. The temperature gauge climbed unnaturally fast. Someone had tampered with the truck while we were stopped at the last rest area. Halfway across the bridge, steam began pouring from under the hood. I pulled over, the metal grates groaning beneath the truck's weight. I opened the glove box for a flashlight. Black beetles poured out. They spilled across the floorboards, crawling over our boots and screaming into the cracks. Caleb panicked, kicking them away. That's when I saw the dashboard. Someone had carved into the soft plastic. Not words. A coffin. Inside it were 2 sets of initials, SM and KM. Our initials. A scratching sound came from the truck bed. The wooden crate shifted. Its lid slowly lifted, and a long iron hook slid out, catching the edge of the cab and pulling tight. The engine died with a violent hiss. "Run," Caleb shouted. We bailed from the truck and sprinted across the bridge. Fog swallowed us instantly. Every step echoed off the steel grates. But they weren't our footsteps alone. Clack. 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 Wooden clogs. I glanced over the edge of the bridge. Below us, dark water churned around the pylons. Small rowboats drifted in slow circles, each carrying someone holding a burning torch. They weren't ghosts. They were waiting. That's when we reached the woman with the candle. She stood exactly where the road narrowed, eyes sewn shut, face lifted like she was listening for us. She blew out the flame. Hands grabbed me again. This time, something sharp hit my face. Salt. Coarse rock salt thrown straight into my eyes. "Blind them," someone shouted from the fog. "Keep them on the bridge." I howled as my vision exploded into white fire. Caleb swung blindly with a heavy wrench, cracking bone. The grip on my throat loosened. We ran, stumbling, screaming, half blind, until Caleb found a maintenance ladder bolted to the bridge railing. We climbed into the steel rafters and hid, clutching each other as footsteps surged below us for over an hour. When the sun finally burned away the fog, the bridge was empty. My truck was stripped bare. Vegetables gone. Cider gone. Even the seats were missing. Police later told us people lived in the caves beneath Mist Valley. Scavengers. They used fog, fruit, salt, and fear to steal supplies during winter. The woman with the sewn eyes had been blinded years earlier. They used her as bait. The coffin carving was just to keep people from coming back. It worked. We never recovered the truck. And I never drive through Mist anymore. Because when I see a candle flicker in the dark, I don't think of warmth. I think of someone pointing at my tire, deciding if I'm worth stopping. I was staring into my rearview mirror at 4:10 a.m. on the deserted Ravencrest Hollow Road when a giant porcelain face appeared in the reflection of my back seat. It wasn't a mask. The white surface was cracked like old china, and its glassy blue eyes blinked, perfectly timed with my own. I slammed the brakes. The sedan spun sideways on the slushy pavement, rotated almost completely around, and slid backward into a frozen ditch with a bone-jarring impact. My chest felt like it was going to burst. I twisted around, fumbling for my flashlight. The back seat was empty. Just my folded sleeping bag and a box of vanilla wafers. "Did you see that?" I gasped. My friend Xavier didn't answer. He was staring out his window. Pressed flat against the glass from the outside was a small porcelain hand with only 4 fingers. It dragged slowly down the window. Scrape. 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 Then the horn started blaring, long, steady, and impossibly loud, echoing through the hollow like a signal flare. "My name is Brooks. This happened last December, when Xavier and I took a midnight shortcut through the northern hills to reach a ski resort for New Year's. We'd been driving for hours in my old sedan, living on energy drinks and peanuts. Snow dusted the road, and the hollow narrowed into a stone corridor that felt too tight for comfort. We should have stayed on the interstate, Xavier muttered earlier. This place feels wrong. I laughed it off, but the canyon walls pressed in like they were listening. The radio was dead, just static and a faint, rhythmic thumping that continued even when I shut it off. The headlights barely pierced the darkness. As we drove deeper, the air inside the car began to change. It smelled like old perfume and wet cardboard, thick and cloying. Then something dropped onto the car. Not debris. Fabric. A massive sheet of black velvet slammed over the windshield and windows, plunging us into total darkness while we were still moving. "I can't see," I shouted, stomping the brakes as the car fishtailed. I threw my door open and ripped at the fabric, realizing it wasn't just cloth. It was a full theater curtain, heavy, hand-sewn, trimmed with gold tassels, anchored by iron weights. I looked up. On the ledge above us stood a figure in a vintage clown costume. Baggy silk pants. A ruffled collar. Where its head should have been was a brass gramophone horn. I tore the curtain free and dove back into the car. "Go!" Xavier screamed. I floored it. The iron weights clattered behind us as we sped away. That's when the singing started. A scratchy, operatic voice filled the cabin, warped and mournful, like an old record playing at the wrong speed. Scritch. 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 The sound was coming from the floor. Near my foot stood a small silver sewing needle, embedded upright in the carpet. It vibrated as the singing grew louder, as if the sound itself was stitched into the car. The road narrowed. The voice swelled. Then the back of the car dropped hard. It felt like something heavy had climbed into the trunk. The tires screamed under the sudden weight. I glanced into the mirror and saw a hidden seam in the back of my seat split open. 2 small white gloves slid out and began tying my shoelaces together. While I was driving, Xavier grabbed them. He reached back. The gloves snapped away instantly. In their place, a red glass marble rolled onto the seat. Inside it was something pale. A human tooth. My stomach turned as I kicked my feet free and kept driving. The hollow opened slightly, and what waited ahead was worse. Every tree along the road had been wrapped in white lace. Hundreds of wooden picture frames hung from the branches. Each frame held a photograph of a car driving through this exact stretch of road. Xavier pointed with a shaking hand. That's my car." In the photo, we were visible through the windshield. The timestamp was minutes old. The singing stopped. The car's digital clock began spinning backward, numbers blurring into a red streak. That's when I saw the porcelain face again in the mirror. The horn blared. The porcelain hand scratched the window. And then the trunk burst open. A man in a full-body mannequin suit crawled out, plastic limbs scraping across metal. He hauled himself onto the roof, breathing hard, and began smashing the car with a lead pipe. "Get out," he screamed through the mask. I slammed the car into reverse and rammed the rock wall of the ditch. The impact launched him off the roof. The plastic suit shattered on the frozen ground. Underneath was a man in a gray tracksuit, his face painted white like stage makeup. I didn't stop. I gunned the engine, tore free of the ditch, and drove until I saw the lights of a fire station. Later, police searched Ravencrest Hollow. They found the velvet curtains, the mannequin suit, and a cave converted into a darkroom filled with thousands of photographs. The costume group turned out to be 3 brothers, former theater performers who'd lost their family stage in a fire. They used mirrors, magnets, hidden panels, and planted props to turn drivers into unwilling actors. The porcelain face had been a sliding reflection panel installed while my car sat at a diner. They didn't want to kill anyone. They wanted applause. We still went to the resort. But now, whenever I check a mirror, I don't just look at myself. I look for eyes blinking back,